When I married Jerry, I was fortunate to inherit some real estate from my grandparents. They advised me to use it wisely to secure our future, but also suggested I keep it confidential, even from Jerry. They believed it was prudent to maintain a passive income that only I controlled, ensuring I'd always have financial security. Unfortunately, Jerry has a habit of overstepping boundaries, particularly regarding possessions and finances. For instance, he once tried to redistribute gifts I had bought for my parents, giving them to his parents to enhance his image. His actions troubled me, especially when he reacted poorly to being confronted about them. Recently, a much more alarming incident occurred. I discovered $22,000 had been withdrawn from an account I managed, intended for our living expenses. This account was meant to complement the income Jerry contributed to our household, and I had no recollection of making such a large withdrawal. The only possible explanation was that Jerry had taken the money. When I confronted him, he nonchalantly admitted that he had lent the funds to his mother, Kayla, who was going through some difficulties. He did this without informing or consulting me. The revelation was shocking, not just because of the large sum involved, but also because it demonstrated a lack of communication and respect for our mutual financial decisions. This incident made me rethink the dynamics of our relationship. If our marriage isn't built on mutual respect and transparency, especially regarding finances, it may be time to reconsider our future together. The assumption that one spouse's earnings automatically belong to the other without any discussion is not a sustainable way to manage a marriage. If this approach continues, we may need to face the possibility of separation. Although the money was originally mine, earned through hard work, and we still have some savings, the loss isn't financially catastrophic. If Kayla was truly facing difficulties, I understand the need to help. However, I would have appreciated a simple conversation beforehand. The account is ours after all. If Jerry had taken the money from a personal account he set up before our marriage, I wouldn't have been as upset. But withdrawing such a large sum from our shared account without discussion felt like a breach of trust. When I expressed my disappointment, Jerry seemed irritated and dismissed my concerns. He promised, albeit reluctantly, to inform me next time before making any major financial decisions. Then, he excused himself to the bathroom, leaving me feeling unsettled. It wasn't like the early days of our marriage, when Jerry would genuinely listen and value my input. Is this what change in a marriage looks like? A few days later, I visited my in-laws to deliver a package that had mistakenly been sent to our address. My mother-in-law, Amy, greeted me warmly and invited me in for tea. Though I had planned just to drop off the package, I accepted. While there, I noticed several luxurious items around the house: expensive cosmetics, stylish clothing, and health products. Amy mentioned, almost casually, that these were all gifts from Jerry. The realization hit me hard. The missing $22,000 had been used not out of necessity, but for extravagant purchases. The idea that Jerry had lent money to his mother for emergencies suddenly seemed like a gross exaggeration. This misuse of funds made me question not only our financial partnership but also the respect and communication in our marriage. As I sat there quietly sipping my tea, the atmosphere shifted. My in-laws' smiles faded, and they began to look at me with a strange mix of fear and accusation. Amy's tone turned confrontational as she remarked, "My son is such a wonderful, generous boy, always buying gifts for me. But what about you? As his wife, are you taking good care of my wonderful son? There seems to be some trouble. I heard from Jerry that you've been giving him a hard time for using the money to help me." It became clear that Jerry had portrayed himself as a victim to his parents, a good son, simply helping his mother in need. This explained their fearful and defensive attitude toward me. The revelation drained the last bit of patience I had, not only with my in-laws but with Jerry as well. I never expected such a lack of support and understanding in my marriage, and the thought of divorce started to feel like a real possibility. I began envisioning a post-divorce future where I would move back into my parents' home. It was a two-story house, over 32 years old, built before my brother was born. It had once comfortably housed our family of 5, but now it stood mostly empty, becoming impractical for my aging parents who struggled with mobility. Although the house had been modified with handrails, its spacious layout was more of a challenge than a comfort. A one-story home would be far more suitable for their needs. With the financial security from my passive income, I realized I could rebuild their home into something more comfortable and accessible for them. This idea filled me with both resolve and relief, so I called my parents to discuss not only my decision to divorce but also my plan to renovate their house. Surprisingly, my parents weren't shocked by the news of the divorce. Their calm reaction solidified my decision. It seemed they understood my need for a fresh start. When I brought up the idea of reconstructing their home, I could hear genuine joy in their voices. "We're so glad you're thinking of rebuilding the house for us." "Thank you," they said. They reassured me that even if they couldn't live there for much longer, it wouldn't be an issue since I could eventually take over the house, which would be funded by my own income. "Well, I'll start planning it bit by bit," I replied, feeling encouraged by their support. "Just take it easy and don't overdo it," they advised, their words instantly lifting my spirits as I began organizing the rebuild of my parents' home. It felt like the start of something new, a fresh chapter not only for them but for me as well. I had been waiting for a response from the construction company when Jerry suddenly confronted me, his anger palpable. "How dare you use our savings to build a house without telling me anything about it?" he accused, slamming his fist on the living room table. His voice grew louder, completely disregarding my feelings. "My parents will be living in the new house," I said firmly, trying to keep my composure. "That's impossible," Jerry roared, his face reddening. "That house was built for my parents to live in." He insisted that since he viewed the funds as our shared property, his parents had as much right to the house as mine. "Are you seriously planning to cram 5 people into that tiny one-story house? Just give me the house," he demanded, banging the table harder with every word. Fearing how much worse his reaction would be if he discovered the truth about the passive income I had kept secret, I realized it was time to reveal everything. "To tell you the truth, I have passive income," I confess, feeling the weight of my grandparents' trust. "It's from the real estate my grandparents gifted me, and I used that income to pay for the rebuild. Not a single penny came from our shared savings." The guilt of breaking my grandparents' promise to keep this secret gnawed at me, but I had no choice. As I spoke, Jerry's anger escalated. His face twisted in fury, his shoulders shaking, and his fists slammed the table even harder. "What kind of wife hides an income from her husband? You spend my money but protect your own with secrets," he shouted, his words cutting deep. His reaction clarified everything that had gone wrong in our marriage: lack of trust, respect, and any sense of partnership. The issues had been festering beneath the surface for too long, and now they were impossible to ignore. "I'll take the house as alimony," Jerry sneered, his arrogance shocking me. "Any house built while we're married is mine too. I'm the head of the family, and if you disobey me, I'll divorce you." I stared at him in disbelief. How had I spent so many years with a man who could so easily dismiss my feelings, my contributions? The passive income had been meant as a safeguard for our future. If his earnings fell short or if something happened that left me unable to work, it was meant to protect both of us, not drive a wedge between us. Now, I saw clearly that my grandparents had been right to advise me to keep it a secret. They must have seen something in Jerry long before I did. I had planned to share my passive income with Jerry when the time was right, but after everything, I no longer felt any desire to use that money on him. Frustrated, I stood up and left the house, needing space from the suffocating atmosphere. I spent the night at a business hotel to clear my head and think through my next steps. When I returned home the next morning, Jerry was waiting for me with a sly, unsettling smile. He smirked as he approached, holding a sheet of paper he'd been hiding behind his back, divorce papers already filled out. "You're lying about your passive income, aren't you?" he sneered. "You made that up to cover for stealing from our common savings." His baseless accusations were tiresome despite my honesty about the passive income I had from my grandparents. No matter how much I insisted on the truth, Jerry was stuck in his own narrative, refusing to believe me. "It's the truth. I have passive income," I said once more, but I could see he wasn't interested in listening. His inability to trust or respect me was the final straw. It became painfully clear that this marriage offered none of the support or partnership I needed. The path forward was now inevitable. With a smug grin, Jerry shoved the divorce papers into my hand and said, "You let me know when my parents can move into the house, right?" He patted me on the shoulder, as if this was all some joke, then walked out the door, humming as he mentioned he was off for a drink. In that moment, everything clicked. Jerry had been concealing his disdain for me throughout our marriage. He had never truly valued my feelings or respected my perspective. The realization stung, but it also brought clarity and freedom. I didn't hesitate. I packed my things right then and there, filled out the divorce papers, and left the house for good. I moved in with my parents temporarily, explaining the situation to them. We agreed I would stay with them until the new house was completed. The next day, I noticed my phone flooded with missed calls from Jerry. When he called again, I decided to answer, hoping it would be our final conversation. How? Hey, all your stuff is gone, he said impatiently, sounding confused by my actions. What's going on? Why was he panicking? He had pushed for the divorce after all. We're getting divorced, Jerry, I replied calmly. It's normal that I wouldn't stay. I will be coming back, so feel free to use the empty space however you like. There was a pause on the other end. Maybe for the first time, Jerry realized that I had resources he couldn't control. Then suddenly his tone shifted. His voice became unusually sweet, a side of him I had never heard before. Hey, would you let my parents live in the new house? He asked, almost pleading. I hung up without a second thought. I finally moved on. I don't care if I have to live with your parents. Please, Jerry's plea stunned me. I already told you, it's a small one-story house, I reminded him, incredulous. And it's meant as a surprise for my parents. His suggestion was absurd. Not only was he proposing to give away a house he hadn't contributed to, but he spoke as though it was his to offer. His reckless disregard for reality left me speechless. You don't care about the savings, do you? Jerry continued, oblivious to my growing frustration. You have no idea how much I worried about the money I set aside for you as an allowance, and the funds I saved for our living expenses. This conversation only solidified my decision. Jerry's understanding of our finances and our relationship was completely skewed. Moving forward without him was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. I explained to him the efforts I had put into managing our finances, how I had struggled to make ends meet, but he brushed it off, dismissing the significance of my sacrifices. That has nothing to do with what's happening here, he said coldly. You're careless with money, leaving the hassle to other people. And now you're presenting yourself to your parents like you did everything on your own. I confronted him, pointing out how he always tried to take credit for my hard work. His sudden silence only intensified my frustration. It became clear he was trying to paint himself as the mastermind behind everything, wanting to gift the house I built for my parents to his own, capitalizing on my sincerity just to impress them. His behavior was shallow, deceptive, and utterly insulting. In the end, you're just trying to take advantage of my goodwill and claim what isn't yours, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. There is no justification for trampling on my feelings and intentions like this. I will not give you the house I built with all my heart for my parents just so you can show off. Jerry grew louder, perhaps out of desperation. Husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. I'll tell them you built it, please. We're not a married couple anymore, are we? I cut him off. We're strangers now. I already filed for divorce, remember? His face fell, realizing that the boundaries I had drawn were final. On the day Jerry handed me those divorce papers, he may have thought he was in control, but now he knew otherwise. I submitted the divorce papers to the city office immediately. Jerry had been the one pushing for it, but when faced with the reality of our separation, he seemed stunned. You already filed? Why are you so surprised when you're the one who asked for the divorce? I asked, incredulous. Oh, I didn't think you'd actually leave me. Hey, let's start over. We can talk it out and be a good couple this time, he pleaded, as if unaware of the gravity of his actions. How could he say such a thing now? This was a man who had squandered our savings on his mother, threatened me with divorce, and ridiculed me to the bitter end. Reconciliation was out of the question. No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents, I said brightly before ending the call. The next day, my phone was flooded with voicemails and messages from Jerry, still demanding that we get back together. His persistence was baffling and completely unwelcome. His repeated attempts to reconcile only affirmed my decision to move on. Jerry claimed we could start over and that he loved me, but I sensed his real interest was in my property and fortune, not in our relationship. To sever ties completely, I blocked all contact from him and his parents. Meanwhile, the construction of the new house was finished and my parents and I moved in. We now live comfortably in the home I built, surrounded by peace and contentment. Sometime later, I ran into a mutual friend who also knew Jerry, and I shared the news of our divorce. My friend offered kind words and updated me on Jerry's situation. It turned out that Jerry had abruptly quit his job, claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. When his company couldn't reach him, they were left scrambling. The next day, Jerry tried to retract his resignation, but his bosses, frustrated by his sudden disappearance, demanded an explanation. Unable to admit that he had been banking on my income, Jerry lied about his circumstances. Eventually, the truth about our divorce came out, and his lies were exposed. His company refused to rehire him, realizing he had tried to manipulate the situation for his gain. Ironically, the man who once scoffed at my passive income, suggesting it was a lie, now found himself in a precarious position. He returned to live with his parents, who were understandably upset. He's now struggling to find a new job, his reputation marred by his dubious exit from his last employment. As for me, life has moved forward in a positive direction. I'm living with my parents in the house I built, working a job I love, and enjoying life. The passive income I had once saved for our future together will now be used to support the people who have always stood by me. This turn of events has brought me a renewed sense of peace, and it's clear that moving on was the best decision for my well-being.